noun, or you can treat it as a verb. Let's go with verb. Let's be proactive on this thing. Let's go to the next one. And the goal here is to be planning and not just reacting. So you want to estimate what's coming in and how you'll spend it, and you want to adjust that periodically. And the periodic part will vary, of course, depending on whether your market's all year, whether it's seasonal, whether it's annual. You want to go to the next slide. What we really want to encourage people to do is to stay on top of it. So I see a lot of folks in business as vendors, as farmers, and then sometimes as market managers as well, that are periodically reviewing their numbers, but by periodically, they mean at the end of the year when they're doing their taxes. And by then, it's way too late to make an adjustment that's going to fix your current season or your current month or your current week. So you really want to be watching those regularly. So there's two ways, obviously, to balance your budget. And this is very similar to any kind of business you've ever operated or your household budget. You can either increase your income, you can work more, you can get that second job, you can figure out ways to bring in more money, or you can decrease expenses. And whether that means having less people on staff, at home, whether it means living in a smaller place or getting rid of that clothing budget, it's really, really basic. It's just exactly like running your home operation or your business operation. You can either increase income or you can decrease expense, or you can find that golden spot where you do both. So let's go to the next slide. Shiny, this is very helpful. So your review and adjustment periods, weekly is ideal. You want to be checking certain things weekly. Did you fill all your spaces? If you're not filling all your spaces, do you need to get out and recruit more vendors? Do you need to, as Shiny does, make sure that you're really insisting that people show up every week, or at least every week that they're scheduled, so that you've always got, if you've got an available space, if you have an available way to make a vendor fee, you're doing that by making sure your spaces are full. Did your expenses change? Are you short of staff, so you're having to pay people overtime? You want to look at that. Did you forget to cancel the Porta-John delivery on that week that you were out on your alternate week? That's going to cost you money it didn't need to. So you want to be watching that every single week and just making sure that weekly you're where you were last week, or maybe you're a little bit better than you were last week. Monthly, hopefully you're doing a profit and loss, and whether you have an operation that has a bookkeeper or somebody that can produce that for you, whether you've become familiar with QuickBooks or Xero or some kind of platform that lets you do that, or whether you're just sort of figuring it out on an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Drive spreadsheet, which honestly I did for many years before I got to the bookkeeper stage. So you're adding up your income, you're adding up your expenses, you're seeing what the difference is. Hopefully that's a positive number when you break it all down. But you want to look at that at least every month. Did you meet projections? Hopefully you did projections. We'll talk about that. Are you up from last month? Are you down from last month? Do you know why? Is there something that's causing an exceptional variation in your income or your expenses? Are you just really short of staff and you can't find somebody, so you're having to pay overtime? Are you really short of staff and you can't find somebody, so are you having to work a lot yourself and you're saving a little bit of money on payroll? Are you down on vendors? Is weather affecting your markets? Are you having to close markets during the month? There's some things that aren't controllable. There's some things that are, but knowledge is power. So you want to review those as often as possible. Seasonally, if you're running a seasonal market, or even if you're running a year-round market, we roughly quarterly sit down and kind of look at what that quarter looked like versus last year, maybe project what the next quarter is going to be. If it looks like we're down 10 or 15% from the previous year, we're going to adjust our projections for the next quarter so that we're careful about expenses, or so that we look for additional sponsors, or so that we think about other ways we can raise money or cut expenses going forward. If we're up a bit from the previous year, that's a win, and maybe we'll adjust a little bit and increase our marketing budget so we can keep that roll going. Maybe we'll look at, are there vendors that have been missing markets and we need to talk to them about making sure that they're there, or putting them on an alternate week schedule or something that we know that they can commit to, so that we can get another consistent vendor in there to fill in the gaps. So you want to watch it on a really regular basis. And then annually, we do a pretty deep dive review and we do full projections. And our business improvement district hosts require this. So that's lucky for me. It means that I have to do it. So find somebody to make you do it, because it's really easy in the day-to-day operations of a market to not want to take that time to sit down and work those numbers and look at that budget and see where you are and see where you might be going. But we do that very regularly on an annual basis, very, very thoroughly. And the fun thing for us, or at least for me, and it depends on your personality type probably, is making me do those projections each year means that I have goals. So every month when I'm doing that P&L, I'm looking at, what did I project for June? Where am I? Am I over on income? Am I under on expenses? Is it going the other direction and I'm in a little bit of trouble and I need to work harder next year? But it gives you a report card to play against. It gives you goals, and it will help you keep looking at ways that you can make everything work. Keep that on the positive side. Let's do the next slide. And the nice thing about doing the slides in this rather odd manner is that I can also see the chat. So, if you have questions, holler out, raise your hand, put something in the chat and we can unmute and talk about it too. So when it comes time to make choices about your budget, whether you're at the projection stage or you're at that monthly review stage where you have to look at, can we increase income? Can we decrease expenses? You want to make your decisions for budgeting match up with your mission. So there are many ways to increase income, and there are many ways to decrease expenditures. And what you want to do when you're faced with those decisions is go back to, what is your primary goal when it comes to your market? Did you create this market so that you can keep farmers in your area farming and you're super devoted to small business and vendor incubation? You may make slightly different choices. Instead of looking at a fee increase for your space fees, you may look at, how much power can we put into finding community sponsors? Where can we look for grant support? So you may take a different tact than somebody whose main focus is food access, or whose main focus is incubating staff and making sure that they're paid well. Or you may be aligned with an organization where part of the function of the farmers market is organizational fundraising so that they can achieve their other missions. So you have to take all of that into account, of course, when you're deciding where you're going to cut expenses, who you're going to go after to increase expenses. Obviously, probably all of these things are in some ways related to what your mission is as a farmer's market. I think all of us have a pretty wide mission that covers a lot of aspects. Farmer and vendor support may not actually be in alignment with organizational fundraising. So you need to make sure that you are not sacrificing one group in order to promote another group. And so you have to be really intentional about going through your budget and deciding where you're going to cut, what your main target is for increases. We are going to talk about space fees and the fact that those are not necessarily bad for vendors to farmers and vendors when you raise those a bit. So it's not that you wouldn't consider that if you're super devoted to farmer and vendor support, but you might first go look for marketing sponsorships in the community where you can charge somebody 4 or 5 times the space rent to have access to your audience, and they can subsidize the farmer and vendor rent. Okay, next slide. So there's a wide variety of sources of income. We certainly in our early years relied almost entirely on vendor space fees. And that still is the bulk of our income. That is where most of our income comes from. But if you have a smaller market, we're operating a market now that's relatively new to us. We started it a little bit over a year ago. We're in a neighborhood it's a community that's south of San Diego, between San Diego and the Mexican border. The demographic is somewhat more limited in terms of income than the market that we've been running for a very long time in Little Italy, although that changed as we grew. That demographics income was much more limited when we first started. We're looking now at all the different ways that we can generate income to keep that market flourishing and keep it thriving for that community. So vendor space fees are still our main source of income. I know that some of you are charging a membership fee or an application fee that kind of falls into the same area. My guess is, based on having talked to a variety of farmers market managers over the years, that those membership fees are probably annual. Application fees are probably once when the first person starts. But that does give you a little bit of extra there. It's unless you have a very, very large market or that's a very high fee, which in my experience, neither of those things are necessarily true. That's not going to be a huge portion of your income, but it does help. Grants are available for a variety of things. FMPP will come up again every year. There's a lot of money available there for new markets, but there's also money available there for increasing the kinds of things that you do. FMPP will support you in doing vendor education. It'll support you in helping your farmers to grow and to gain education. So there's a lot of different things you can use grants for. It will help you with food access. Do understand that grants are not there's a piece on the other side of that balance sheet that balances it out, because grants can be extremely have high time requirements in terms of staffing. So when you take on a grant, they may give you some what feels like free money from somewhere else, but do understand that you're going to have to devote a reasonable amount of staff time in most grant situations to doing the administrative tasks that come with a grant. So be sure to include that when you're looking at feeding grants into your income side, that you're looking at extra expenses that those grants may require to fulfill. Sponsorships, really important. We generally, at this point, are looking at defining income from outside organizations in two different ways. So sponsorships, we look upon as folks that want to do this on a philanthropic basis. Maybe it's a healthcare company that wants to align their name with somebody that's doing good things like farmers markets are. So Kaiser Permanente may just give you some money each year as a philanthropic sponsorship. They maybe get their name in your newsletter or on the banner that's in your booth. They get to tell their folks, their stockholders and their members that they're doing this warm fuzzy thing. They're sponsoring a farmer's market. And there's a bunch of people out there like that. Banks and credit unions, oftentimes, depending on your municipality, may have an actual legal requirement to supply sponsorship to a community event or a community organization. So there's money in those kind of pools that you can go after, and that certainly will help your budget to go looking for them. Market partnerships, we are defining as folks that are sponsors, but they're not sponsors just because they want to do a warm fuzzy thing. They're sponsors because they want to reach the folks that are coming out and shopping at your market. And so aligning with you, whether it's in the form of an actual 10 by 10 canopy where they have staff on site at your market, either once a month or every week, depending on how your structure is, they're willing to pay for that because they know that you're attracting people that find certain things important. So you'll find folks that are doing, say, cleaning with natural cleaning supplies. They will love getting out to people that shop at farmers markets because they feel like they have that kind of mind frame. Folks that are doing telehealth services, a lot of times they'll come out and do that kind of thing. We see a lot of folks like realtors that want to reach people that are in your community, and you're definitely drawing kind of a community specific group. So they want to come out and set up a booth. We see folks that are doing home renovations, same kind of thing. So in our markets, what we do, because we don't want to dilute the grocery store element of our markets, is we host one market partner per week. And sometimes that's a nonprofit that pays roughly what our vendors pay for a space, and sometimes it's a corporate entity like a cleaning supply company or a realtor or someone like that, and they typically pay 3 to 4 times what our farmers or vendors pay for a space, because they are not there every week. Folks aren't coming specifically to see them the way the farmers and vendors are. We think they're doing a lot of the work to generate that traffic. So the market partners pay quite a bit more than our farmers and vendors do, and that lets us use their money to subsidize traffic control and to subsidize farmers' rents and to subsidize our staffing. Shani saying most of our community partnership booths pay $50 to $100 a date. Great for our budget, given that our vendors pay 5 to 15. Exactly right. You know, we're charging our farmers and vendors at a very large market, sometimes as much as $75 or $100, but we're charging a market partner $800 to $1,000 for that same booth. And so that lets us keep our vendor fees lower for our vendors and farmers. You're doing it absolutely right. Another way to generate income is special events. We've seen some markets be really successful with a dinner with the farmer kind of event, where once a year they set up long tables, and maybe they partner with local chefs, and the local farmers supply ingredients and they sell tickets, and folks come out and get a chance to spend a little social time with the farmers and vendors. We're celebrities. They like that. They want to come out and talk to the folks that are at the farmers market, your loyal shoppers, and sometimes the chefs in the neighborhood, people in food service want to come out and meet those folks. We find that those actually, used to be more geared to marketing and awareness. So you do those kind of dinners to just let people know who you were and to develop a relationship with them and get them coming back to the market all year long. It works for that, but also if you manage it well, it can be a fundraising source in itself to a significant degree. There's, Ferry Plaza and Boise both this year have raised a lot of money by doing special events where your shoppers come out and eat with your participants. So that can be another source of income. Retail sales, if you've got a welcome booth and you're selling t-shirts or you're selling shopping bags, generally speaking, you can make a 40 to 50% mark on those. That can add up over the course of a year if you've got a reasonably busy market, and people like to be carrying around those things that tell them that they're part of the market too. Mandy from the Chicago Green Market spoke at our conference earlier this year and was talking about friends of the markets that got a special bag, and her staff is oriented to approach those folks when they're carrying that bag or wearing that t-shirt or that hat and thank them for supporting the market. So you can create a real mutual appreciation society through your retail sales if you price them to a degree that lets somebody indicate that they're a real supporter of the market. Friends of the market kind of operations work the same way. And that's where shopper donations come in. Some people put a great big pig with a slot in its back out of the market and let people just donate some cash, keep the market going. Other people run very organized friends of the market operations where people can earn premiums, kind of like pledging to a public radio station or a public TV station. You can do the same thing for your market. People want to help you. Your supporters want to be part of the market. It's why Kickstarter has always been, fairly successful for very small businesses and operations. Give them a chance to do that. There's lots of ways to increase your income. We're probably going to talk the most specifically about vendor fees because that's where most markets, we find in our data, and also Amanda's recent survey found that vendor fees are typically the largest percentage of your income. So let's talk a little bit about expenditures. Next slide. So there's fixed expenses and there's discretionary expenses. And this is sort of a basic business identification of how expenses are. And it's something that you're probably coming up against every month. So there's some things you can't control much in terms of what your expenses are. Your venue fees are probably what they are, at least for a year at a time. You can maybe negotiate those. Some of us are on city streets where the fee really is only what we pay for permits, and in our case, what we pay for traffic control. So we have to pay the police to come out every morning and check to see if there's cars in the way and manage those cars being removed, and we pay the police department to do that. Some markets are paying to use a parking lot, and that's where they're setting up their market. Some markets are paying specific fees to parks departments. So venue fees a lot of times are combined with permit situations, and that's how they're covered. But probably one way or another, there's some kind of expense attached to being at your venue, and that probably stays stable throughout the year. That's not something that you're making a decision every month about whether you're going to spend more or less on that. Same thing with permits. Those are typically annual, whether you're getting a permit from your parks department or your Department of Health or your ag department. And if you're in California, you pay all of those. In Oregon, you may be paying only one or another, depending on what city you're in, what county you're in. Insurance. I'm hoping all of you have insurance for your market. If you don't, I'm surprised and hope you feel lucky. We pay a lot of insurance on our larger markets. We pay a reasonable amount of insurance on our smaller markets. That's something, again, you're probably not going to negotiate that every month. You've probably paid that annually, and that's what your insurance cost. Equipment rentals, if you're renting things like porta-johns, some people rent traffic control equipment, although I think most of us have acquired it over the years. But the equipment rentals are probably something that you know what you need. You've made a deal. You're going to pay that every month. You're probably not negotiating that or changing it up every month. You can't decide that it's been a slow week, so you're not going to have porta-johns this week. That kind of just has to keep coming. So those are things that are typically fixed expenses. Payroll can be both a fixed and a variable expense. So obviously, if you've made a deal with your staff that they're going to get X number of hours and they're going to be paid X amount per hour, or they're on a salary, that's not something that you want to be flippantly changing up from month to month or week to week. Where payroll becomes a variable expense or a discretionary expense is that if you are not as busy as you expected, you may need to look at cutting your payroll down, whether it's by decreasing staffing or making sure that you're not going into overtime situations. Maybe it's adding a staff member, maybe it's looking at some volunteer help. We've got a philosophy we're pretty serious about paying people, but I know that a lot of markets rely heavily on volunteers. And that may be something to look at if you're trying to save a little bit on payroll. Let's do the next slide. So those discretionary experiences can fall into payroll, just in terms of being careful on hiring and not committing to more than you can comfortably cover out of your budget every week or month. The other kind of discretionary expenses, you can look at nutrition incentives. We, as our income increases, like to increase when we can. Everybody else seeing somebody's calendar? There we go. We like to increase as we can our nutrition match, but generally speaking, nutrition match is what you've committed to that through the year. You're going to set maybe on an annual basis and stick with it. I have seen some markets that have gotten tight on money that have then had to decrease their match. I've also seen markets that mid-season have found a new source of money. They've maybe had more sponsorships than they expected, or they get a specific sponsorship that wants to contribute to nutrition incentives, and so they've increased their match. They're matching a larger amount of money when people use EBT cards and such. The big discretionary expense. I know computers have a mind of their own today, right? Jenny says Chrome extension took off without me. Yeah, I'm not sure what's up. This is usually fairly smooth at sharing the screen, but the tech giants are against us today. So one type of expense that tends to be very discretionary is marketing and promotion. So depending on whether you're seeing a good, strong, positive balance in your income versus expenses, you may want to increase, say, subscriptions to something like Later or Social Pilot that makes your social media work better. You may want to look at different forms of advertising that are paid. Some people are running paid Instagram ads, running paid Facebook ads. You can place an ad in your local print newspaper if you still have one, unlike some of our cities. You can print flyers, you can print posters. We are finding analog marketing right now is really, really effective. So we're spending money, as long as we're remaining in that positive flow each month. We're spending a lot more money now on actual posters and taking them out. We're talking to our city about placing banners on streets in certain neighborhoods. We're increasing the amount of signage that we post at the ends of the market, and depending on whether you can get permission from nearby property owners, what you place on nearby properties. We're seeing vendors and farmers doing things like printing campaign signs as we go into election season that say, I vote for my local market, and getting those out into yards. So there's a lot of ways that you can use a marketing promotion budget. If it turns out that your income is really lower than you expected, you may not be able to do that. You may have to take a break, but that's one of those things that's really, it's a big conflict. It's a chicken and egg thing, figuring out cutting back on marketing if you're not doing well is absolutely non-intuitive in terms of a way to solve that. The idea is to increase your marketing if your income is decreasing. That's usually what's going to pick it up, is more marketing, more getting out there. Everything from doing incentives for your local school to have kids bring you a book report and give them some market money, to getting out to cooperative community events. There may be ways to do that that's not real expensive, but that's typically a discretionary expense. That's something that on a very short-term basis, very quickly, you can adjust from month to month. Yes, Ashley, the future is analog. That's what I hear. We're trying to stay out of ChatGPT land. Next slide. So fee structure adjustments are how many people adjust their budget. It's something that you don't want to do, obviously, too often, because it's going to drive your vendors crazy if you do that. And you've made a commitment to them. They've committed to show up. You've committed that this is what you're going to charge them per month. But really low space fees is where most people get into a budget where they're not making enough to cover, say, a professional level staff, or they're not making enough to devote to marketing, whether it's by paying a staffer to do very consistent, very creative social media, whether it's paying for printed materials, whether it's paying to get banners printed and installed on the street. So raising fees is typically the way that you raise your income, the most obvious way. And if you look at really minor increases in fees and what a difference it can make to your market, this definitely is the way that a lot of people balance their budgets. Some people resist this with the idea that, oh, I don't want to take advantage of my farmers and vendors by raising their fee. But the fact is, and we've talked about this in some of our other workshops, the space fee is not the primary cost of having a vendor come to market. Their primary cost is their staff, what they pay to produce their product, and that becomes a very high cost if it's wasted, if it's not sold. The fuel that they spend to get to the market. If you look at what they actually pay in space fee, typically speaking, that's a very, very low percentage of their overall overhead for that market, maybe 5 to 10%. So raising a space fee incrementally is probably not going to be the breaking point between whether a farmer or vendor considers your market a good deal or whether it's productive for them or not. Selling more is what makes them decide that your market is worth being at. It's what it gives them the advantage of spending the time producing that baked good, growing those crops and bringing them to the market and spending their time standing there getting to know their customer and making those sales. Sales increases are vital to farmers and vendors, and that really is what they're after. They're not looking for the best deal on space. They're looking for the best sales available. So looking at some of the data that Ashley provided, or Amanda provided me in terms of the typical size of a market, we just did a really simple kind of case study to show you how those numbers add up. So if you have 30 vendors, which sounds like it's sort of an average thing, and I run markets that have 35 vendors and I run markets that have 180 vendors. So you take these numbers and you multiply and they still accomplish the same thing. 30 vendors, if you're charging $25 a market now, that's $750 a week, it's $37.5 a year. So you've got that much to work with in terms of paying salary, whether it's yours or some other on-site staff member. It's what you've got to work with in terms of marketing. It's, again, your time or a staff member's time. It's what you've got to work with to print flyers and posters and get out to other community events. It's what you've got to work with in terms of covering all your fixed expenses. So if you take those same 30 vendors and you add $5 a week to that fee, for the vendor, it's $5 a week. The space rent is not much of what it's costing them to be at the market. So if they make but it costs them something. So they can't just make one $5 sale and come out even. They probably have to make at least an extra $10 in sales. And if they make an extra 20, they're in good shape because some of that sale is going to go to overhead. So if with that extra money going from $37.5 to $45,000 a year, you can add a part-time staff member that can up your social media. If you can add on flyers that get distributed in your local coffee houses and yoga studios and at the community center and brings in more shoppers, and each of those 30 vendors can make an extra $10 a week, they're going to be very happy. The extra $5 is not going to hurt them. The extra $20 a week or $10 a week is going to help them a lot. How much can you do with that extra money each year? If you also spend time to go recruit additional vendors, and then you add maybe another $5 to that market fee, so now they're paying $10 more, but they've got additional vendors there. So you've got critical mass that's adding up. You've got more money that you can add into your marketing budget. You've got more staff that you can add to get out into the community and do some of those meetups and community events and distribute flyers and get posters in the windows. All of a sudden you've gone with a fairly small increase in fees to $1,400 a week and $70,000 a year. That can make a significant difference in how much marketing you can do. Obviously, this is going to vary depending on where you are. If you're in a teeny tiny community and you just really don't feel like you can pull in more shoppers, no matter how much you put into marketing, maybe that fee is not reasonable. But I'm going to say that most folks have more shoppers to draw on. Everybody in your town, no matter how small your town is or how small your neighborhood is, has to eat. And there's a lot of people still shopping at grocery stores. The knowledge of farmers markets has increased, but not as much as farmers markets have increased in terms of the number of markets available, in terms of the farmers and vendors that are selling there. So we've still got a lot of shoppers to pull from, and increasing that marketing budget and increasing staff time to be able to do one-on-one personal outreach to people in your neighborhood and community events likely is going to increase your shopper count exponentially. So increasing that vendor fee a little bit in order to give you a lot more money to work with in order to increase the traffic count at your market is going to benefit your farmers and vendors. This is not something you're doing to take advantage of them. This is something you're doing that is going to advantage them as well as the market as a whole. Next slide. So your vendors have fixed and discretionary expenses too. They have to pay the fuel to get to the market. They have to pay the space fee. They have to pay staff. That's discretionary for them too. If they're busy, they may need more staff people. If they're slow, they may just be there doing it themselves. That takes them off the farm. So they have to work that into their expense budget. The additional sales that they make, though, will have less overhead than the first sales because they do have those fixed expenses that fuel to get to the market is going to be there no matter whether they make 10 sales or 40 sales. That staff person that they may have there is going to cost them the same whether they make 10 sales or 40 sales. The cost of producing the product is discretionary unless they're wasting it and it's something like a baked good that can't be sold tomorrow or leafy greens that are going to wilt and can't be sold tomorrow. That wasted produce costs them a lot. The additional sales typically will have more punch to them than the first sales. So anything that you can do that increases the sales for each farmer and vendor at the market is going to make a big difference. So if you go from that 30 vendors at 25 to 40 vendors at 35 and you have an additional $32,000 a year, can you do enough marketing to generate an extra $20 in sales per vendor? And I'd love to discuss this a little bit and what you think about it as we're getting to the end here. I think you can in most situations. If you've got a situation where you think that's not possible, I'd like to hear about that and what kind of challenges you're looking at so that we can maybe talk through that a little bit. But I think most of you with that additional money could add enough power, could get a little bit more sleep yourself, could add a part-time staff member that can help you with social media or with outreach to the community. And I bet you can generate $20 in sales per vendor. In fact, I bet you can generate multiples of that if you have a little bit of extra money to play with by balancing that budget and taking the worry of balancing the budget off of you every month. Can you do that next slide? Marketing partnerships are the other way to significantly increase your income right away as you're going week to week, month to month. You don't have to wait to the end of the year to do that. So that's the other thing, in addition to adjusting your vendor fees, that I suggest you look at really closely. Pick a goal, figure out how many marketing partnerships you want to do this year, and then sit down and start looking first at maybe who follows you on social media. What businesses are following you? Is there anybody local that's commenting on your posts that has a business that might be a good fit for you? We're pretty discretionary about who we let be a marketing partner, actually. So we're careful to not put people into our market to do commercial outreach if we feel like what they're selling isn't a good fit for our market. If we don't typically host food businesses because our goal is to teach people to shop at farmers markets versus grocery stores. So a food business coming in to promote a food that you can only get by going to a grocery store is something we usually avoid. But we have a huge list of people to pick from. As you grow, you'll find that probably people will start approaching you. And especially if you really do a good job of supporting your marketing partners, making sure that they're mentioned in your newsletter, putting their flyers on your table, making a note on your social media, hey, we really appreciate Connect Realty because they're our marketing partner of the day or our community partner of the day. Would you like to learn how to be a marketing partner? Email us here. Make sure that you make that opportunity known. Put it on your website, mention it in your social, make sure you mention it in your email newsletters, and put an easy click for businesses to contact you. And I think you'll be surprised how many local businesses want to be at the market and take advantage of the community that you built and the people that you're appealing to. And sometimes you'll see marketing partners that'll come in that have something that they want to sell to your vendors. So we'll see marketing partners come in from bio bags because they want to sell compostable bags to our farmers. There's a wide range of folks that actually want to support you and want to take advantage of what you're offering in terms of a curated audience that's coming to your market that might also be interested in what they have to offer. So pick a goal, see if you can hit it each month, move that goal up as you're hitting more and more, but devoting a little bit of time to that oftentimes will bring in enough money that you can also push out people to do more general marketing to shoppers. That really gives you an easy access to a little fund. Friends of the market, And I will be honest, this is something that I have not pursued, and we should, but we haven't. I have seen some people do a beautiful job of it though, and it can be really, really productive for the markets. Your fans are probably rabid fans. They probably love you. That's the whole point of farmers markets, of course, is develop those personal relationships with your shoppers. So I'll bet you have a lot of people that want to help you, that want to be part of the market. And Friends of the Market is a terrific marketing tool as well as an income increaser, because once somebody signs up as the friend of the market, you will be amazed how often they will come out to the market with friends of their own and say, look, this is the market that I support. When they have family in town, what's the first place they're going to take them? To the market they support, where there's a friend of the market. If you're having special events, those folks are the first people that are going to buy your tickets. So developing that in a structured way and allowing them to pay an annual fee or a monthly fee to be a friend of the market and support what you're doing can add significantly to your annual income. And it also adds to your traffic, because people will come out to see the people that they're supporting. Maybe they want to check up on you and see what you're doing with their money. Maybe they just want to come out and say, hey, love what you're doing. I'm a friend of the market. I'm dedicated to this. If you've got one of those cards that you use at a grocery store that gives you loyalty points and things, or an airline that you fly frequently, so that's who gives you the miles and that's who might give you a chance at the best seat, that's who you look at first. And so your friends of the market are going to come to you first. They may have to swing by a grocery store at some point in the week to pick up what they can't find at the market, but the first thing they're going to do is check out and see what you have available, because you're who they belong to. You're their friend, they're your friend. So you want to pursue that. That can be another really easy and very quick way to increase income. You don't have to do that just annually. You can think about it at any month. We've got some bandwidth. Let's start this program. Let's do it very simply. You can do it on your Squarespace website and just make it something that they purchase. You can set up a Spotify. Square now has an element where you can add a product and they can buy a friend of the market membership. So it doesn't have to be really complicated. There are some wonderful, very complicated platforms that will let you track the prospects that you have for those kind of programs and get regular emails out to them and run kind of crazy funnels and things. And that's great, but it's not absolutely necessary. If you've got an average size market and you want to increase some income with a Friends of the Market program, it can be done really simply through some social media and email outreach and a simple buy now button on a variety of your websites and your socials. Let's go to the next slide. Lacey says, are there resources for markets looking to start a Friends program? Okay, so we've struggled with garnering shoppers' financial support in the past. I'm afraid an effort like this might fall flat. And we're kind of at the end here. Are you ready, and Millen, to share a big slice of market success? We had to throw a food pun in there. So we're going to go to Q&A, and let's just go on. And we can do this in chat, or if you want to drop a thing in the chat and then you want to unmute and talk, I'm absolutely happy with that too. So Lacey says, we've struggled with garnering shoppers' financial support in the past. So I'm afraid an effort like this might fall flat. I think that last slide, Shani, is just, me and the website. So the watermelon are probably prettier for us to look at. What have you done? Lacey, do you mind telling us what you've done in the past to get something like how you've asked people? And then Lynn, maybe you can share what you're doing, because you say you're generating about $1,800 or more a year to do it. Anybody want to talk? No?
Oh,
go ahead.
Lacey, did you want to go first? Okay, well.
Yeah, Lynn, go ahead. It's always fun to talk about what's working.
Yeah, so I got an idea when I was down in New Orleans at their market, and they have a really good Friends of the Market program, and brought that back to our market. And so we put a committee together and put together a brochure, and we have different levels of friends. So at different levels, you get different kinds of bling. And when you get to the top level, you get a tour of one of our biggest local farms and a picnic and all that. But people are excited to support the market, and it doesn't take much effort. And it's typically, people that either have been coming to the market for years and want to see it going, or people are just enthused about a farmer's market and they just love coming. So It's not a lot of money yet, but we've only been doing it for a couple of years. So I think we need to focus a little more effort on promoting it.
That's great. Are you using a particular donation platform, or are you just putting a click here on the website, or how are you collecting funds?
At the market, we just run it through Square, or people can, give us a check or whatever, or mail it to us. We have a donate button on our website, but our website's not, is in reconstruction stage, if you can believe it, in the middle of market season. Yeah, that's another story. But so we don't have a lot promoting the Friends on our website, but we do promote it occasionally on Facebook, so Instagram.
Got it. So you're at 1,800 or so a year, just kind of promoting it at the market mostly, and
Yes,
taking
correct.
income at the market. Yeah. So that's a healthy amount, given that it sounds like there's minimal effort really involved with it at this point.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. And Lacey, you're saying you did winter giving campaigns, raffle, social media campaigns, give butter campaigns. I mean, that sounds like a lot, and you have not had a good response.
Yeah, so sorry, I found my mute button now. So we've tried a number of different tacks. In the winter, we had some financial surprises. We were really scraping for funds, and so we were doing a winter giving campaign. So we really pushed that at the market. We had signs and banners. We had it in our newsletter. We had it on our social media. We had it as a pop-up on our website. So the first page when you go to our website, it gives you a pop-up with the option. And that was not super successful. We've also done some more kind of lighthearted things. We've done a couple more specific things, like when the gas in our truck was repeatedly siphoned, we kind of took some funny pictures of us, like with this gas can and, filling it back up again, and kind of put that out as a, hey, like, what's going on here? But like kind of tried to make it a little bit fun. People didn't respond to that. This last week we did a raffle. We had a shopper donate some really truly amazing produce bags that she made. And we were like, hey, we can raffle these off, and got very little response. And that was posted multiple times on social media, had a pop-up on the website. We had them hanging in the information booth. We had it in the email. And we have a really good, solid customer base. We have a lot of longtime customers. And people always say they love the market. It's their favorite market. They just they're not responding with their dollars for the market, right? Like they shop at our vendors and it's great, but they're not, somehow it's just not connecting with supporting the market itself.
Lacey, how big is your market?
We have anywhere from, I would say like 30 to 40 vendors a week. We've got about 65 overall over the course of the year.
Sometimes I wonder if a really big, part of the reason we've never done a Friends campaign for our really big market is I sort of feel like it doesn't look like we need support.
Yeah.
Because it's so big and bustling. But on the other hand, Mandy from Green City Market in Chicago, they have a very busy, very big market. They have a huge Friends campaign that has been very, very effective for them. Same thing with the Boise Farmers Market, which is very large. So I'm really surprised. It sounds like you're doing everything right. And it was fairly, I mean, when you say there's a button on your website, it was easy for people to donate.
Oh, yeah.
It was click.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't have to go through a lot of verification and weirdness.
Yeah. And we always have a donation jar out on the table at the information booth as well, so that people can just pop cash in it or whatever. Yeah.
It's still not doing it. So that's really interesting. I'm very confused.
I know. We are too.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is why I was thinking, if we, at some point we stopped the winter giving campaign because we just figured people were done with us asking. Like we had just asked too much and they were just tired of it. They weren't paying attention anymore. And so we closed that campaign out. And so I don't want, if we started a Friends program, I wouldn't want it to have the same kind of oh my God, here they are again asking for money. I'm just gonna delete or ignore or whatever. We would want to just see what's worked, what kind of approaches have worked. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would give you suggestions to do all the things it sounds like you're already doing. Anybody else? The why messaging is so important in these campaigns. But I'll agree with that. There's a market in
Mhm.
Northern California that's doing a really aggressive campaign right now, but they don't talk anything about what they're going to do with the money. And I just messaged them and said, because they had a good initial donation burst, and then it's really died off. And I just messaged them and said, maybe tell us what you want to do with the money. I mean, even me, as somebody that would support you, what are you going to do with the money? Why do you need it? It sounds like because they keep talking about how successful they are and they're growing and they're doing all these programs and then give us money. And it's like, why do you need money? It sounds like you're doing okay. So, yeah, so I think, Ashley, you're correct. The why messaging is so important in these campaigns. Interested to know what your shoppers are hearing about why you're asking for support. Do you have shoppers you can get feedback from?
Is that a question for me specifically?
Yeah, I think so, Lacey. So what are you telling them you need the money for?
Yeah, so a lot of it is equipment and infrastructure. A lot of our equipment has aged out. Our tents are really old, and a couple of them are pretty dangerous at this point. And we've had people asking, ever since we kind of like came out of the major COVID restrictions, like, when are you bringing hot food back? And it's like, well, we literally do not have the equipment to provide a space to have hot food. We don't have enough tents, tables, chairs for people to sit down and eat hot food. So we could maybe have like handheld hot food come back, but we can't, like, we literally don't have the equipment because it's all broken and so old. So things like that, like, and our kids program it doubled last year, and it's set to double again this year. We have no direct funding for that.
And so are you telling your shoppers that? Are you saying,
yeah.
hey, let's build an eating area?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, it hasn't been in the direct, like, this is a campaign specifically to raise money for, the kids program or a hot food eating area. But it's been a little bit more general, like, hey, our equipment is aging out, and we need to provide this. These are the things that we provide. We provide a free booth for a nonprofit. We provide a master gardener booth. We provide, all the equipment for sponsors and community partners to come and set up at the market.
So Ashley's saying, help us. And did you know? Those are super easy prompts to start the stories.
Right.
I would say, if you're not campaigning to support a particular program, that might be your answer, is that you want to do more of that. And I know that actually, as a giver, I'm more inclined to give for a particular program that's important. Kids programs are important to me, or learning programs are important to me. And when obviously, all of us in the world right now are getting hit with everybody in the world that needs money for the one thing or another. Oftentimes what makes the difference, I can't give to all 15 people that asked today. So I'm going to do what somebody who's asking for something that just appeals to my kind of pet. This is what I like to promote in the world, sort of thing. So I think that could be a really good idea to say, did you know we provide the tents for the community partners? And some of those community partners are doing things like helping kids or helping pets, or covering people that have been ravaged by fire, or training farmers, or any of those things, or help us build an eating area so you can enjoy time with your neighbors at the market after you shop. So I would maybe, this next time, as opposed to a general campaign, as opposed to a Friends of the Market or a winter fundraising, maybe give a try to a fundraising campaign that's aimed at at building a community eating area. That means we have to buy 6 tents and 8 tables and 8 tablecloths and 42 chairs. So you can kind of knock it down as to what really they're donating to. And then as they see those things happen, I'm guessing that they may be more inclined to give to the next thing that you ask for, the next effort that you ask to fill.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's helpful.
Anybody have any questions or opinions or input on fee structure issues?
Could you tell me again what you charge for a marketing partnership a week?
Yeah, we tend to charge anywhere from 5 to 10 times what we charge for a regular vendor. So at our small market in Chula Vista, for instance, our regular farmers pay $20. It's still a really new market. Our food vendors pay $55. A marketing partner there pays $300 to be there for the week. So a realtor will pay $300 to be there for a week. Or we've got a home concierge service that's just bought 3 different weeks. And we only let community marketing partners be there for a maximum of 5 markets a year. We just don't want to have the market aligned with a commercial entity too closely. So we try to mix it up some, but they are happily paying that per week for those marketing partnership kind of, and we call them sponsor activations. So when somebody reaches out to us and says, I'm a realtor, I want to have a booth at the market. What does that cost? How's that work? We say, well, we host informational and promotional businesses. That includes a 10 by 10 activation at a market. And this is what the rate is. And that money gives you access to our vendors. We tell them we only have 1 marketing partner at the market on any given market day, so that their message is completely undiluted. They're the only people that are, and we tell them we do that because market shoppers can be somewhat resistant to the appearance of commercial influence or commercial presence. And so we only have 1 per week, which means you are it. And we're going to talk about you in the newsletter, and we're going to mention you once in social media, and you will have a completely undiluted chance to reach our shoppers while they're there to buy groceries. And I get really almost no price resistance. And it sounds like Shiny's doing the same thing in terms of pricing. And she's got, again, like Chula Vista, kind of a smaller market. At our really, really large market, the really big market, we're charging people like $1,500 to be there for a week to do that kind of commercial presence. So, but it's a really large market. There's a lot of overhead there. But again, we don't get much pushback because there's a lot of traffic, and they know people are looking for certain things, and they got a certain mindset. They're looking for healthy things. They're looking for community things. And so they've got a really nicely curated target market there. Ashley's off for a board meeting. Thank you for being here. See you next time.
I'm going back to the messaging, reminded me of a suggestion we had from somebody on our fundraising committee. And that is like putting out, a couple of different donation boxes and stating the purpose on the front of the box. Because people, like you say, often do want to give to a specific project instead of just, hey, we need it for operations,
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. I think very specific asks are much more effective. And Amanda's noting that October 17th, you've actually got a whole workshop coming up on building business sponsorships. It can be super, super effective. Shiny, if you're still hanging out, what kind of organizations are coming in as sponsors at your market or as marketing partners?
We have an interesting sort of hodgepodge of groups right now. We have an application on our website, which really helps streamline everything. So I'm not wrangling all of their information. They self-select into the amount they're going to pay. And we explain some things about the labor that their presence asks of us. And then we ask them to make an informed decision. Are they offering between, 0 and 100, but most of them select into $50 or $100.
Okay.
We've had, community organizations, we've had other nonprofits that work with foster youth. We just had Metro, which is a government agency, at the market giving out free life jackets. Holy moly, that was really popular. And they paid me $100 to be there and do it.
Nice.
So it was a huge draw. The vendors loved it. The shoppers loved it. The Multnomah County Library is there every market giving out free books. We have the health department partnered with a local hospital vaccination team, and they're there doing COVID, monkeypox, and other relevant community vaccinations every market. They're paying me $600 for the season to be there doing it.
That's great.
So we have a lot of partners who are the kind of people you want to bring to your community, who want to come and actually pay to be there. And then we have a couple of orgs that maybe people don't love, but they got a prize wheel and they do good things for the environment and such. They just haven't figured out how to be exciting in their approach.
Yeah, it
Um,
does one of those too.
but they know they need a prize wheel to make up for the lack of outgoing information there.
Right, right. Are you going out and recruiting those marketing partners, or are they mostly coming to you?
They come to us. We recruit for nutrition incentive partners. So like we've worked with a local Native family organization to distribute market bucks to their diabetes patients. So they each got, $50 across a wide variety of their people to come to the market and shop for the first 6 markets. So it was nutrition incentive money that their nonprofit had. And so we do reach out for those. I have my SNAP coordinator constantly reaching out to culturally specific orgs and asking them, do you have nutrition money? Do you do money for these kinds of projects? Do you want to spend it here? And then they're usually armed with information about whether we have any farmers or vendors who match their population, so that they know you can come here and find these Native businesses. You can come here and find these Filipino businesses, and make that connection to that organization's mission.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, that's part of balancing your budget, is taking things that that are in your expense column, that you're going to pay for, you're going to do some nutrition incentives, you're going to need staff to do that. Every time you pull in some money that takes that out, that, you're adding to your general fund, you're adding to the funds that you can use for marketing or whatever, because you've brought somebody in to fund that specific need that you're going to have. You're not going to stop doing that if you don't have the money, but if you can find somebody to support that, then that money that you would have devoted to it is now part of your marketing budget and can increase your shopper count, which, benefits your marketing partners and your farmers and your vendors.
Hi,
Yeah.
Kat. I was wondering if you would be able to talk a little bit about it when you are raising vendor fees, how you go about rolling that out and how much notice you give. Do you try to do it as the season starts, or any best practices on that?
Yeah, so what we find most effective, we definitely give notice. So we usually give them 4 to 6 weeks notice. I mean, if somebody really is going to leave the market because of an increased fee, they need to have time to figure out where else they're going to go and such. I don't think I've ever had anybody leave because of an increased fee. In fact, my team tends to get really stressed about increasing fees. We never do it more than once a year, and typically it's about every other year we'll kind of evaluate fees, and a lot of times we're only increasing fees in a certain category. So we have very rarely raised farm fees. We did finally, I think 5 or 6 years in, do an increase to our farmers fees, especially at our bigger market, because the traffic control and things had just gotten so expensive. And in fact, they're probably doing more sales than anybody else, but we think our mission is to support farmers, and so we've always subsidized their fees by charging more to people in particular that do hot food, or we've got one block at the end of each end of that market where there's crafters and that kind of thing, and those tend to go up. But we're just really, so there's a couple of things. One, we give them notice. We give them 4 to 6 weeks notice. 2, we really analyze it. The last time we did an increase for food to eat on site, we did a little survey thing that they could fill out, and it said, we're increasing the fee. This is what it's going to. And it was a heftier increase than we'd had in a while, because we've had some really big expense increases in terms of insurance and things lately. But we said, but this is how you can pay the least amount of increase. What percentage of local ingredients are you using? And they had to verify who they're getting them from. What are you making personally? If you're selling a sandwich, are you making the bread? Are you making the ingredients? Which farmers are supplying any lettuce that's on that sandwich, that kind of thing. So we gave them, so if there's some ways that they can make choices about what their fee is going to be, it's just like when we change the location of a vendor at a market, we don't say, hey, we're going to move you here. We say, hey, we need to move you because our farm section is getting bigger, so you're going to need to move somewhere else. Would you prefer to be here or here? So we identify 2 different places they could go. So if somebody can have a choice, can contribute to any change that's coming to them, that makes them feel better about it. We tend to do price increases going into the heaviest season. We're a year-round market at all of our markets. We have a year-round growing season. We're very busy all year, but I think everybody is busier in the summer, unless you're in Texas or Arizona or somewhere hot. Most of us are busier in those summer months. And so it's that going into that month is typically when we raise anybody that's got anything to do with food. So farmers or grocery vendors or food prepared to be on site, we would be doing those kind of increases in June, and we'd probably be letting them know about it towards the end of April that it was coming. So you always want to do it when it's the busiest. We tend to raise non-food vendor fees like crafters. Those we usually evaluate, and if we're going to make a change, we make it in usually October, mid-October, and we'll start giving them notice the first part of September, because holiday season is very, very busy for them. So we want to, if we're going to make a change that's going to increase their expense, we want to have it be at a time when their income is also increasing. So back when we had restaurants, they used to always tell us, change your menu prices right before Thanksgiving, because that's when everybody's busy and distracted. And by the time they get to January, where their heads come up, they'll be used to them. They won't even notice it. So there's a little bit of that to it, that we're raising it when their income's going up. So it's not painful to them and they're busy, and it's not going to affect them too much. So that's kind of how we manage fee increases. We try to give them some options to earn discounts. We give them 4 to 6 weeks notice, and we typically raise the fees at the busiest time for that particular category, so that they have extra income to deal with learning how to change their own budget to work with a higher fee. Shani says, we're doubling fees next year. Good job. I think your fees are so low. I'll tell this year's vendors at the end of the season, and then we'll announce again publicly when the application opens. And I think that's so smart. And you're saying, double is an increase of $5 a week for most of them. The other thing that's really effective when you're looking at raising fees is to be really transparent with your vendors about what it costs you to produce a market. So I think a lot of our vendors didn't realize until we started being more transparent with them that our staff are not volunteers. And it's amazing sometimes how a vendor who's been with us for 2 or 3 years will say, well, I talked to one of your volunteers. I think it was Caitlin. It's like, well, Caitlin's not a volunteer. Caitlin makes $22 an hour, and she gets, paid holidays, and she's not a volunteer, and she's awesome. She's not here doing this for free, and we wouldn't expect her to, but they don't realize that that's an expense overhead for us, or they don't realize what we have to pay for insurance given the amount of traffic that we generate, or what that guy that keeps people from getting hit as they cross our market stretches over many blocks, and it's got open traffic streets in the middle that people have to cross. So we have to pay for traffic control. So being kind of transparent about what you're paying people, what kind of expenses you're having to cover, that Porta-John doesn't just show up for free because ferries bring it, that costs you money every week, that all of these things, we have a staff member dedicated to social media, that brings more shoppers to the market. Those are the people that are buying products from you. In order to generate all that traffic, this is what we're spending to do it. So I know of markets, there's a couple of markets that I'm aware of that actually give their vendors their entire P&L at least once a year. And so it's super transparent about what they're spending to produce it. Ours is probably accessible if somebody wanted to dig in, because typically our permit hosts are nonprofit organizations locally. So I think they have to publish their budget so they could find it. We're not usually line item giving it out to them, but we give them a general idea of, this is the percentage of our budget that goes to staff, and this is the percentage of our budget that goes to marketing. This is the percentage that we use to pay California Department of Food and Agriculture fees for each of you for each time you show up at a market. This is what insurance costs us. And so I think that extra transparency helps, because like the general public, it's amazing how many farmers and vendors don't realize that farmers markets don't just happen, that they not only take staff, but they take money to produce an effective market that has a fair amount of shopper traffic. Next year's the end of our FMPP. We have to transition to a new, more stable model. Yeah, exactly. And that's the other thing, is I think farmers, vendors, and shoppers sometimes assume that farmers markets are government entities and that they're magically supported by public funds. And so if you're not transparent about that, both to shoppers when you're asking for donations and to your farmers and vendors, I think a lot of times they don't realize that you have to be funded by somewhere, whether it's FMPP, whether it's vendor fees, whether it's donations, and being really obvious about that it takes effort and money, and people need to get paid, and insurance needs to be bought, and all of those things have to happen in order to create the market. Makes it less painful for people to to pay an increased fee. But the main thing that I tell people too is that these fees will allow us to do more marketing, which should increase your sales. And I firmly believe that, so I can say it absolutely honestly. And they generally get it. And as I say, my staff always gets a little bit stressed about, oh, you're going to tell people you're raising fees. And I almost never have had any pushback. I mean, I've had a couple of really old vendors who'll say, can't believe I'm paying $10 more. I've been here a long time. I helped build this market. Very rare, very rare.
Is
Usually,
anyone here?
yeah.
I see a hand raised.
I did. Hannah?
Yeah, it sounds like you have like a price break or different price model for folks like value added or prepared food vendors who are doing local sourcing.
I do.
And I'm just curious how you verify that.
We check with we actually, I don't know if any of you follow our memes on Farmers Market Pros or some of the things. We've got one coming up. It's kind of a funny meme that says when the food vendor tells you their ingredients came from the farmer and doesn't realize that you can verify that with a text in 2 seconds. So that's what we do, is we verify with the farmers. And it's amazing how we don't, well, I won't say we don't very often, because we do more in the application process than somebody who's actually already at the market. But we do have a fair amount of people that will ask in the application process, are you using local, what are your sources for specifically fruits and vegetables? If you have any of that in your ingredients, what are your sources for that? And they will blatantly give me the name of a farmer that used to be in my markets 5 years ago and that I know went out of business 3 years ago, or the name of a farmer that is in another area and isn't actually producing what they say they're getting from them. I don't know why some of those folks think that we don't know the farmers, but some of them apparently think we don't know the farmers. So we absolutely verify. We will say, who are you buying it from? What farm are you sourcing from? And then we'll check with the farmer.
Yeah, and so we do that too, especially, on our application, and we've seen that before, definitely, where they list a farm that's out of business or something. Are you only doing that during the application process, or do you do that like during the year as well? Like, are folks like ever turning in receipts, or is it just like word of
Yeah,
mouth?
we don't audit that heavily. We don't ask for receipts. We do check from time to time. We'll talk to, Mike at JR Organics and say, hey, is Barracuda still buying your peppers? Or we'll ask, another farmer, so-and-so still buying your ingredients. We don't ask for receipts. If I had a suspicion, I might do that. But we don't generally audit quite that closely. Do you?
I've only ever had to ask for receipts from one vendor this year. For the most part, we can check with the vendors, the farmers, and they're like, oh yeah, they buy, every other week, or they buy like occasionally. But we are interested in kind of adopting a different model for folks who aren't able to meet our threshold, which I think is like 15%, which is actually kind of can you kind of have to work towards it if you're not used to it. So we are just kind of experimenting with a different model where if you're not meeting that threshold, then you're paying more, like you're saying, to support the market these other ways.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I think, and for us, there's some ingredients where it's not practical to ask them to shop local. California is notoriously bad about grain. There was a big campaign for a while. It was the 2020 camp, and of course it ran into the goal year was 2020, so that was part of why it sort of fizzled. But the idea was that by 2020, all bakeries at the farmers markets would need to use at least 20% locally produced grains, but we don't produce much grain here, and so it's not realistic actually to expect them to do that. But we still, for somebody that has somehow figured out how to source enough grain to bake with California grown grain, we do offer those kind of discounts and things. So it's a carrot versus a stick. We don't necessarily say that you won't be in any of the markets if you're not using locally grown X, but if you are, we try to make it really attractive to do that by space rent discounts and a lot of extra promotion that talks about it. And we encourage them to promote it heavily, to get it onto their chalkboards, to get it onto their signage that, we're using produce from this farm and this farm and this farm for today's smoothies and things. You're welcome.
Has anyone here had experiences with raising fees and getting feedback from their vendors about that? Was it smooth? Did it go by smoothly, just like it does at Cat?
Yeah, I think we always assume that it's going to be, that people are going to be so resistant to it. But I think if you can explain to them what you're doing with it, and I think if you're actually generating extra shoppers, they can see that you're working on marketing thing. I've always had it validated by the fact that almost nobody has ever resisted or seemed surprised by it. And right now, everything in the world has gone up, and they know that salaries have gone up, and they're having to pay their people more and things. And well, I'm sure nobody loves a fee increase. I don't get objections. Lacey says, our fees are some of the highest in the area. I don't feel there's much room for an increase. We've had vendors leave because our fees are higher and they're not getting the sales to justify it versus another market. Yeah, and that is true. If you're not getting the sales, I can see how that would be a problem. If you've got another market, but are they leaving, do you think, because the other market has lower fees, or are they leaving because the other market is generating higher sales for them? Combination. Okay. And is there something you can do to increase those sales? Always ask. Oh, good. Yeah. Absolutely ask. Anybody have questions about generating P&Ls or budget, general budget questions, what should be aiming for, or most people doing their own budgeting and bookkeeping, or are you using a service or a platform for that?
We do our own.
Yeah.
I work with a bookkeeper to do budget projections every year. And then we run it by our board, finance committee, and then it goes to the board.
Great.
It's usually based on, what did we do last year? And then what do we want to accomplish? We look at our strategic plan and, what do we want to do this year, and adjust our budget accordingly.
Smart. Yeah.
Share
And
with
when we
vendors?
talk about budgeting to mission, that's the whole thing, is this has to be part of your entire approach. Money doesn't really live in that little box all by itself. It affects what you do, and it affects who you hire, and all those things. Lacey says we use QuickBooks Online, do our own. New board treasurer has nonprofit accounting experience, so we're not currently employing a bookkeeper. That's cool. And do you, Lacey, do you get reports pretty often from them? Do you get like a monthly P&L or a weekly? You probably track your own stuff weekly. You run the reports. Okay, cool. So you're getting them fairly often. I think that's the key. I'm always surprised how many people think that checking on their numbers once a year or twice a year is a good idea. And it's, you want to, if something's going in one direction or the other, you want to catch it as soon as possible and either take advantage of it or fix it, depending on which direction it's going. Check them constantly. Yes.
We're about to do a mid-year budget to actual, see where we are, if we have to do any adjustments or raise any more revenue.
That's great. And I'm doing that every month when I look at, I get a P&L each month because our hosts have a bookkeeper that does that. But I also am looking at, I do an annual projection that's laid out as, this is the income I project for June and for July and for September and for October. And when I'm adding up receipts, I'm looking at.
Hi, and welcome to our webinar on functional forecasting. This is being hosted by OFMA, and I love all the tech stuff today. I was just trying to
I love it. The tech stuff never ends.
Another video.
It's just that kind of tech day. There's something in the stars, in the atmosphere. But yeah, I'm always trying to beat my budget, keep my expenses in line, keep my income high, actually. And people have different attitudes towards budgeting. Some people are just determined that they can do it by decreasing expenses and being really smart about expenses. And to be honest, that is not my side of the equation. I do watch that, but my inclination is always to figure out how to raise income as opposed to decrease expenses, because I'm always trying to spend more on marketing and pay my people more and all that. So I tend to look at that side first. I know other people are just really, really smart about allocating for expenditures and that kind of thing. And that's probably not, I'm not as strong there as I am at increasing the income so we can keep it flowing. So we're getting down to, I think, the end of our time. Anybody else have any questions about anything that we talked about, or last month's webinar on functional forecasting? Cool. Well, I like that, Amanda. I'm going to look at that myself. Good. Was it good?
Well, thank you, Kat.
Well, thank you.
This is a great one too. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for everybody that came, and thanks for contributing your experiences and your thoughts and your questions. And Shiny, thank you for facilitating, making our tech work as well as it could today. I'm not sure what's in the atmosphere about the tech stuff, but we made it happen anyway. Thank you very much. Yeah. Appreciate
Thanks a
you.
lot. Appreciate it.
All right.
See you all later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Everyone.